Hey guys, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and it is Sunday, and we are doing breaches of the week. And as always, this week is just as crazy as last week, if not worse. Now, before we begin, I'd like to thank the following people that sent me tips, links, leads, tags, all this kind of stuff to alert me to a lot of these breaches, and thank you very much. It's always appreciated, guys. Rebecca Rutherford, David Walker, Neville Goodalls, and Chris Fallon. As always, it is always appreciated. And if you have a tip for me, please feel free to send it in and I will give you a shout out. Now, to begin, let's start with VTS Media. This is out of Barcelona, Spain. They actually run a number of popular, quote unquote, cam girl sites that have exposed millions of sex workers and users after the company running the sites left a back-end database unprotected. Now, these sites include things like amateur.tv, webcampornoxxx.net, placercams.com, and a whole bunch of others. Now, these are mostly in Europe, but people have been identified around the world as using these sites, including from the United States. Basically, the info found is when users are logging in, including usernames and sometimes their user agent and IP addresses, which can then be used to identify and geolocate people. The logs also include private chat messages with other users, as well as promotional emails they were receiving from various sites. The logs even included failed login attempts, storing usernames and passwords in plain text. That's right, none of the data was encrypted. So if you have anything to do with any of this, heads up to you, that is a rather embarrassing breach. Moving on, let's talk about Magellan Health. This is an update. If you recall from a few weeks ago, Magellan Health on May 28th basically had a phishing scam and exposed their clients. Now, Magellan manages pharmacy benefits for a lot of larger entities, and these larger entities are now starting to declare HIPAA violations. The two this week are Florida Blue, which is Blue Cross Blue Shield. They are saying less than 1% of their approximately 5 million members in Florida were affected, and also TennCare in Tennessee. So if you use Florida Blue or TennCare, heads up to you. Moving on, let's talk about the Iron March Forum. This has been an interesting week. This is an online forum/meeting place for neo-Nazis. Now, a hacker just published a database dump of this forum, which included basically a full copy of its contents, including sensitive details such as emails, IP addresses, usernames, and private messages, probably in an attempt to dox or reveal who these neo-Nazis are. Some hackers wear capes. Moving on, let's talk about Facebook. You might have seen my video yesterday on the disaster that Facebook is and all the proof of the lies that we now have thanks to their internal email correspondence that just got dumped. But here we go. They just admitted dozens of third-party apps may have retained access to certain Facebook user data for months, despite the company putting in place limits on that information. Facebook says that as many as 100 app developers could have accessed information like names and profile pictures through a programming interface for Facebook groups. So if you belong to a Facebook group, you may have been exposed. And if they're telling us it's 100 app developers, it's probably 10,000. I don't trust that company at all. Moving on, we're talking about the DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles, for the state of California. They improperly sent Social Security data to 7 government agencies over the last 4 years. Now, this release basically affects about 3,200 people in the state of California, and the government agencies that received this Social Security information was the Department of Homeland Security, the IRS, Social Security Administration's Office of Inspector General, which you think would be able to get a Social Security number, Small Business Administration's Office of Inspector General, California Office of Health and Human Services, San Diego County District Attorney's Office, and Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office as well. Now, no other information was accessed according to the statement. There was no hacking or other sharing of information according to the California DMV. So heads up, if you're in California, you might be one of the 3,200 that had their Social Security information shared with government agencies, apparently illegally. Moving on, we're going to do an update on Marriott. If you recall, Marriott had a breach of about 500 million users or so. I want to say it was last year. It was one of the worst credit card scams ever, outside of something like Equifax. They just talked about a new incident that exposed the Social Security numbers of their associates to an unknown attacker. Now, I'm assuming associates is employees. As revealed via a security notice, the incident primarily hit a third-party vendor who once collaborated with Marriott. That vendor is not named. The affected vendor used to provide services to Marriott for receiving things like official documents such as court orders and subpoenas. Marriott had shared a document with this vendor that included its associates' information, and it was this document that got exposed during this breach. Now, it didn't contain any listed information about the associates, but it did contain their names, addresses, and social security numbers. So heads up if you work for Marriott. Moving on, let's talk about Brooklyn Hospital in Brooklyn, New York. They just got hit with a ransomware attack, and they permanently lost patient data. Now, basically, the records were encrypted in this attack because that's typically what ransomware does, and that includes names, certain dental and cardiac images. The news of this attack was disclosed this week, but it actually took place in late July. The hospital did not pay the ransom. It attempted to recover that data, on its own, obviously through its own backup systems, and was not able to do that with success. So basically, here we are. If you have anything to do with Brooklyn Hospital, they may have lost some of your information. Moving on, we're talking about the Nunavut government. This is basically up in northern Canada. Their communication system was a victim of a ransomware attack early Saturday morning, and as of Sunday night, this is a week ago for the record, so as of a week ago today, this evening, officials still did not know when the systems would come back online. I looked at their website real quick. Their website does appear to be up. So hopefully the Nunavut government, which is basically the government for about 35,000 Canadians in the northernmost part of Canada, hopefully you guys are back online. Moving on, we're going to be talking about two companies. Everis, a major IT services and consulting subsidiary of Japan's massive corporation NTT, and Cadena SER, both of these are in Spain, simultaneously got hit with ransomware. I do not know if these companies are linked or if Everis hit it, but reports are showing that these two just got hit with ransomware, and we're going to see where that goes. I'll bring you an update if anything major happens there. But if you have anything to do with Everis, the IT provider in Spain, or Cadena SER, which is a radio system in Spain, heads up to you. Moving on, let's talk about the Utah Valley Eye Center out of Provo, Utah, here in the United States. They are basically in the process of informing 20,000 patients that they were victims of a data breach that happened about a year and a half ago that actually linked their patients to a scam involving PayPal. Now, on June 18th, 2018, hackers accessed the center's third-party portal that reminds patients of scheduled appointments. And basically, this resulted in emails being sent to a number of patients informing them that they had received payment from PayPal. So in other words, the hackers were basically sending out patient notifications or schedules, basically saying, hey, you owe Utah Valley Eye Center money, and so please go pay via PayPal, and here we are. Moving on, we're going to be talking about Intermed. This is another medical system out of Portland, Maine. They discovered in September that an unauthorized third party had gained access to 4 employee email accounts, and upon investigation, they could not determine what messages or attachments were viewed, but these email accounts may have exposed names, dates of birth, health insurance information, clinical information, and a limited number of social security numbers. So if you have anything to do with Intermed out of Portland, Maine, heads up to you. Moving on, we are talking about Veritas Genetics. Now, this is a DNA testing firm, but what makes them more unique than like a 23andMe is that instead of focusing on just a certain amount of DNA samples, they do your entire genome, and I think you pay quite a bit to have that done. They became aware of a customer-facing portal that had recently been accessed by an unauthorized user. They said the portal itself did not contain genetic data, DNA test results, or health records, that is fully segmented off and very heavily encrypted, according to Veritas, but that their public-facing portal was hit. So if you are a member, user, whatever, of Veritas Genetics, heads up to you. Moving on, we're going to be talking about the Texas Health and Human Services Commission. This is actually an update because the federal government just announced this past Thursday that it is hitting the Texas Health and Human Services Commission with a $1.6 million fine for a data breach that made personal health information of 6,617 people available online, presumably all Texans. The inadvertent release of names, addresses, social security numbers, and treatment information between 2013 and 2017 violated federal health privacy laws and basically resulted in this fine. This is according to the Office for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So heads up to you. If you use the Texas Health and Human Services Commission, apparently they've been leaking data. Moving on, we're going to be talking about Delta Dental of Arizona. Basically, they got hit with an email phishing scam, and the email account had access to several pieces of personal and financial information that are at risk of being exposed by basically an unauthorized user. I don't have much more information on that, but if you use Delta Dental of Arizona, which I believe is based around Phoenix, per my research, heads up to you. You might want to give them a call. And finally, let's talk about Trend Micro, which is going to be our last thing of the day. They announced a security incident where an employee was stealing consumer customer information and selling it to a third party to use in tech support scams. Now, here's what's going on. In August 2019, Trend Micro learned that some of their customers running home security solutions were receiving tech support calls from people that were impersonating Trend Micro tech support agents. Now, the scammers utilized information in these calls that led Trend Micro to believe this was more than a random call and that it could have been an insider threat. So they conducted an investigation. And after conducting this investigation, they determined in October that these phone calls were actually caused by a Trend Micro employee performing unauthorized access to a customer support database, stealing that customer information and then selling it to a third party, basically selling it to third party tech support scammers. And this is why we can't have nice things. The problem, and the reason why this is the last one I talk about, and at the end of my breaches of the week, I always try to talk about one that I think impacts a little more, even if it's not by the numbers, and it's because when we are going to a website, when we are buying a product, when we are walking into a Home Depot or buying antivirus software or whatever it is here, we are entering into a trust relationship with that organization. If I go into a brick and mortar store and I buy something, I trust that they are going to handle my credit card per PCI compliance and make sure that it's secure. If I'm buying antivirus software or any kind of software, I am assuming that they are going to safeguard my information, not sell to third parties unless they explicitly tell me that they're going to do that, because obviously I'm paying for this software, and so I would prefer not to have myself data mined. But they're also going to safeguard my information from things like this. That means vetting their employees very well, limiting access to information, and all this kind of stuff. You know, if you are looking at a good cyber defense framework in compartmentalizing your information, then no one person should have pretty much full run of this unless that person is extremely trusted. And even then, I'm not a big fan of that. You know, if I look at the way, we set these things up, if I have, let's say, somebody on my staff working on a project for a specific client, they don't get access to the whole client folder. They basically get access to the one specific piece of information they need to be working on. Therefore, a compromise of him or her does not compromise the entire data set for the client, which can include usernames and passwords. Trend Micro apparently is running very fast and loose, and for a security company to give people that level of access without that kind of auditing and strict control, I think really speaks to just poor security standards, and that is from a company that is doing security. And so I think that's something that we really need, to talk about. I don't know if you use Trend Micro or recommend Trend Micro, and if you're in the IT or cybersecurity field here, heads up, because your clients may have possibly had some kind of a hit or effect by virtue of this, and that's just one thing that we always need to look out for. So that is your news of the day, and that are your breaches of the week as well. Were you affected? Let me know. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, and please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, guys.